Well, in today's gospel reading, we hear the familiar story of St. Thomas, the apostle who had the misfortune of being labeled for all time Doubting Thomas, because his famous words to the other 10 apostles that had seen the risen Lord. And this is what he said, and you just heard. "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into the nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." So when poor Thomas meets the risen Jesus a week later, Jesus invites Thomas to do just that. Put his fingers in the nail holes in his hands and put his hand into the spear hole in his side. He invites Thomas to enter into his wounds so that he might come to believe in his resurrection. So, was Thomas one of those skeptical guys like we're famous for here in Missouri, the show me state? We won't believe it unless we see it with our own eyes. Well, maybe he was one of those skeptical guys, and he doubted what everyone else told him about the risen Jesus. But maybe there was something else that was driving him in his reluctance to believe in something that, after all, he most certainly wished to be true, and in somebody that he had followed and devoted his life to. Why wouldn't he believe? Well, I think that something else might have been fear. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of fear that we have of strangers or vicious dogs or heights or whatever it is that we're afraid of. I think Thomas might have been afraid of the demands of love. The demands of love. Now, you might think that your deacon's talking crazy talk here because, who's afraid of love? I am. And I think most of you are too in some way. Now, let me see if I can put this into words. Everybody likes to be in love, especially that first stage of love called romantic love. Got any engaged couples here today? Anywhere? No, they're stuck in traffic probably. What? Over here? You? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you like being in love? Yeah, that's okay. Okay. I know we have some parents of newborn babies here because we're going to baptize 2 babies after this Mass and 1 tonight. So Travis and Allison, you like being in love with a baby, don't you? Absolutely. Okay. And for all of you, anyone who's had a friend that is like a soulmate to them, I think you'll agree too. It's wonderful being in love. Now, ask those same engaged couples who've been married for years and years. Ask the parents of these sweet little babies when these kids are adolescents or young adults and they're having all life struggles. Or ask any person who has a lifelong friend who's gone through the ups and downs of friendship with that person. Now, will these folks still say that loving another is what gives life its greatest meaning, and that loving another is the best thing that ever happened to them? I think they will. Okay? I think they will if they've overcome their fear of the demands of love. If they've overcome their fear of the demands of love. And I think that with the grace of God, all of these folks I just mentioned, all of us, will have found the courage to enter into the pain of the one they love despite their fear of doing so. This is the demand of love. This is the price of love. To hang in there, to stay with, to be one with those whose wounds, whose pain we enter into. The Franciscan priest Richard Rohr said that, and I quote, "The greatest enemy of faith is not doubt. The greatest enemy of faith is fear." Now, he correctly said that most of the world is controlled by fear, and most of the world's problems are caused by fear. In our families, in our marriages, our relationships, our communities, our nation, our world. If we had faith in Jesus, we wouldn't fear what he told us in the 8 Beatitudes, the ones that he preached on the Sermon on the Mount. Example, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are the meek." Now, he says that you need not fear being seen weak and vulnerable when you place your trust in me instead of in the wealth and power of the world. He says, enter into the wounds of the poor of this world, those near and those far. And Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn. He says, you need not fear comforting someone who is mourning the death of a loved one. And don't fear the pain that you will feel when you enter into their wounded heart. I will not tell you that you won't feel their pain. You will. You must. But I promise you that I will sustain you. And Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And he says, blessed are the pure of heart. He says, you need not fear standing up for what is right and just and paying the price for your integrity. You need not fear that a heart filled with my truth will leave you empty and devoid of pleasure and joy. Enter into the wounds of those who suffer injustice and in those who are violated in any way. You will suffer with them, but my justice and my truth will sustain you. Enter into the wounds of those who suffer chronic or life-threatening illnesses. Embrace the person who has had cancer or who has suffered a stroke. Enter into the wounds of those who suffer from mental or emotional problems. Embrace the one who is depressed. Embrace the compulsive person who annoys you. Embrace the anxious person who is so hard to be around. Enter into the wounds of your husband, your wife, your child, your brother, your sister, your friend who may be struggling with something that you'd rather not think about because it disturbs your tranquility. Embrace that person when you are inclined to avoid them. Enter into the wounds of the angry person whose hostility is probably fueled by the pain perhaps they suffered early in their life. Protect yourself as needed, but embrace them with an open heart that does not retaliate nor demand an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, these are some of the demands of love that most of us fear. And they are obstacles to faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ that beckons us to enter into the body and into the life of the risen Lord in love and in unity. Jesus invites us to enter into his wounds by entering into the wounds of our brothers and our sisters, those close and those far away, so that we perhaps might be the ones he spoke of when he said, blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. So we pray in this Eucharist for the grace to overcome the fears that we have of the demands of love, so that we can enter into that Paschal mystery that we proclaim in a special way during this Easter season. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again.